Good morning, Algebra 2. We are back with April 20th's Algebra 2 EDay. We are going to continue with the quadratic formula. So if you have these notes, they are super handy. If you do not, then I would strongly encourage you to get a copy of them. Today's 6 problems are different from last week's in that you will not get nice, neat answers. You're going to get some kind of ugly answers. And if you haven't already, make sure you put the quadratic formula on your page. It is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so your answers are going to stay in a very similar structure to what you see right there on the page. So let's go ahead. I'm going to walk you through about 3 of them and we will go from there. So the first one is already set up for you. Remember that if there's no number there, there's a 1. That 1 is your A, 8 is your B, C is 5. So then from there, you just plug in those numbers into that equation. So negative b, so negative 8, plus or minus the square root of 8 squared minus 4 times a times c. All of that divided by 2 times a. Okay, so a lot of this is just going to be cleanup work. Do not put this in your calculator. You're going to get a really ugly answer. So you get negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 64 minus 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 5 is 20. All over 2. So you want to do some cleanup. Negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 44 all over 2. This one's not done yet because every single one of those is a nice even number and 44 has a perfect square in it, so you have to simplify your radical. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take negative 8 over 2 plus or minus the square root of 44 over 2. We're going to separate those because each one can be simplified. Negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4 plus or minus square root of 44. I'm going to come over here where I've got a little more space. Square root of 44 is the same thing as the square root of 4 times the square root of 11. Square root of 4 is 2 times the square root of 11. But remember that down here, 2 radical 11 over 2. Well, I've got a 2 on top, I've got a 2 on bottom, so those guys cancel out. All I'm left with is that radical 11, which comes back here. So that is going to be your final answer. Some of them will not simplify. Okay, I'm going to move left to right instead of up and down. It makes it a little bit easier with the phone. This one, I'm just going to help you set up. That's your A, that's your B, that's your C. So negative B plus or minus the square root, sorry, I gotta move my camera a little bit. Square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c. Do not forget the negative on that 6. All of that divided by 2 times a. Okay, I'm gonna let you take that one from there. Let's look at number 2. Number 2 is also set up nice and neat for you. This is a, this is B, this is C. So you plug in negative B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C. And again, don't forget that negative all over 2A. Okay, we are going to do number 5 together because it is kind of a hot mess. We do not have this in ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, so we need to get it that way. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add 6x. And you get x squared plus 9x equals 8. Then we got to move our 8. We're going to subtract it. and you have x squared plus 9x minus 8 equals 0. Now we can use quadratic formula to solve this. So you take negative b, which is negative 9, plus or minus the square root of 9 squared minus 4 times a, which is a 1, that was not written, times c, all over 2 times a. Now we have to clean up inside that radical. I don't have a ton of space because I write a little too big, so I'm going to come over here. And you get negative 9 plus or minus the square root, 9 squared is 81, minus 4 times 1. 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 8 is negative 32. So minus a negative 32, that becomes plus 32 all over 2. So then you have to do a little bit of number crunching inside that radical. You get 81 plus 32, which gives you 113. So you get negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 113 over 2. This one actually is done. You cannot do any more. You cannot simplify it. You cannot clean it up. So that right there is your final answer. We are going to do what is technically number 3 together, and then I'll help you set up number 6. Number 3 is also not in standard form, so you got to add the 8 first to both sides of the equal sign. Those guys cancel out, so now you've got negative 3x squared plus 4x plus 8 equals 0. Now you're ready to plug in to your formula. So negative b, or 4, plus or minus the square root of b, which is 4 squared minus 4 times a, and negative 3, times c, which is 8, all over 2 times negative 3. Now we do our cleanup. Negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 minus 4 times negative 3 is negative 12. Negative 12 times 8 is going to give you a negative 96. So minus a negative 96, that becomes plus 96 all over negative 6. This one is definitely going to need some cleanup. So 16 plus 96, that gives you 112. So you have negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 112 all over negative 6. Now, the square root of 112 probably has a perfect square in it, but I'll be honest, I don't know that for a fact, so we're going to check. 112, oh, hold on, my calculator is not super happy with me. I'm using one I don't know how to use very well. Okay, so yes, it does. 112 has 16 in it. Okay. So what you're going to do is this. You're going to take negative 4 plus or minus. This is the square root of 16 times the square root of 7 all over negative 6. Not quite finished. Sorry, I went the wrong way with that. All right, so you get negative 4 plus or minus 4 radical 7, because the square root of 16 is 4. I didn't just pull that out of my hat, over negative 6. Now we want to simplify. Negative 4 plus or minus 4, negative 6. They're all even numbers. I'm going to take a 2 out. So literally every single one of those, I'm going to divide by 2 to reduce that. And you're going to get negative 2 plus or minus 2 radical 7 all over negative 3. Now, these two are a double negative. So those two become positive. And there you go. You are finished with that one. Let's look at number 6. It is set up for you. Here's your A, here's your B, here's your C. I'm going to help you plug it in because there's a lot of negatives in there. So what you're going to do is you're going to take negative B. B is already negative. So the opposite of negative 4 plus or minus the square root Here's where your parentheses become very important. Negative 4 squared minus 4 times A times C, all divided by 2A. And I'm going to help you do a little bit of cleanup here because I think those negatives are going to throw you off. Double negative, that becomes 4, plus or minus the square root. Negative 4 squared is positive 16. 4 times 3 is 12. 12 times 8 is 96. Double negative, it becomes plus 96. Then this one is all over 6. I'm going to let you figure out the rest from there. It should be pretty straightforward given that we just did number 3 together. If you have questions, you know where to find me.